Hello, this is Morale Bernard with the continuation of the story, Secret Adversary. Last word said, it is the only possible place, he said, for number 1. Perhaps number 14 will shut the door. In another moment, Tommy was once more confronting bare wooden panels, and the voices within had sunk once more to a mere undistinguishable murmur. Tommy became restive. The conversation he had overheard had stimulated his curiosity. He felt that, by hook or by crook, he must hear more. There was no sound from below, and it did not seem likely that the doorkeeper would come upstairs. After listening intently for a minute or two, he put his head round the curtain. The passage was deserted. Tommy bent down and removed his shoes. Then, leaving them behind the curtain, he walked gingerly out on his stockinged feet, and kneeling down by the closed door, he laid his ear cautiously to the crack. To his intense annoyance, he could distinguish little more, just a chance word here and there if a voice was raised, which merely served to whet his curiosity still further. He eyed the handle of the door attentively. Could he turn it by degrees so gently and imperceptibly that those in the room would notice nothing? He decided that with great care it could be done. Very slowly, a fraction of an inch at a time, he moved it round, holding his breath in his excessive care. A little more still. Would it never be finished? At last it would turn no farther. He stayed so for a minute or two, then drew a deep breath and pressed it ever so slightly inward. The door did not budge. Tommy was annoyed. If he had to use too much force, it would almost certainly creak. He waited until the voices rose a little. Then he tried again. Still, nothing happened. He increased the pressure. Had the beastly thing stuck? Finally, in desperation, he pushed with all his might. But the door remained firm, and at last the truth dawned upon him. It was locked or bolted on the inside. For a moment or two, Tommy's indignation got the better of him. "Well, I'm damned," he said. "What a dirty trick." As his indignation cooled, he prepared to face the situation. Clearly, the first thing to be done was to restore the handle to its original position. If he let it go suddenly, the men inside would be almost certain to notice it. So with the same infinite pains, he reversed his former tactics. All went well, and with a sigh of relief, the young man rose to his feet. There was a certain bulldog tenacity about Tommy that made him slow to admit defeat. Checkmated for the moment, he was far from abandoning the conflict. He still intended to hear what was going on in the locked room. As one plan had failed, he must hunt about for another. He looked round him. A little farther along the passage on the left was a second door. He slipped silently along to it. He listened for a moment or two, then tried the handle. It yielded, and he slipped inside. The room, which was untenanted, was furnished as a bedroom. Like everything else in the house, the furniture was falling to pieces, and the dirt was, if anything, more abundant. But what interested Tommy was the thing he had hoped to find. a communicating door between the two rooms, up on the left by the window. Carefully, closing the door into the passage behind him, he stepped across to the other and examined it closely. The bolt was shot across it. It was very rusty, and had clearly not been used for some time. By gently wriggling it to and fro, Tommy managed to draw it back without making too much noise. Then he repeated his former manoeuvres with the handle, this time with complete success. The door swung open, a crack, a mere fraction, but enough for Tommy to hear what went on. There was a velvet portiere on the inside of this door which prevented him from seeing, but he was able to recognize the voices with a reasonable amount of accuracy. The Sinn Féiner was speaking. His rich Irish voice was unmistakable. That's all very well, but more money is essential. No money, no results. Another voice, which Tommy rather thought was that of Boris, replied, "Will you guarantee that there are results? In a month from now, sooner or later, as you wish. I will guarantee you such a reign of terror in Ireland as shall shake the British Empire to its foundations." There was a pause, and then came the soft, sibilant accents of number one. "Good. You shall have the money. Boris, you will see to that." Boris asked a question. "Via the Irish Americans and Mr. Potter, as usual?" "I guess that'd be all right," said a new voice, with a transatlantic intonation, "though I'd like to point out there and now that things are getting a mite difficult. There's not the sympathy there was, and a growing disposition to let the Irish settle their own affairs without interference from America." Tommy felt that Boris had shrugged his shoulders as he answered, "Does that matter, since the money only nominally come from the States? The chief difficulty is the landing of the ammunition," said the Sinn Féiner. "The money is conveyed in easily enough, thanks to our colleague here." Another voice, which Tommy fancied was that of the tall, commanding-looking man whose face had seemed familiar to him, said, "Think of the things of Belfast, if they could hear you." "That is settled then," said the sibilant tones. "Now, in the matter of the loan to an English newspaper, you have arranged the details satisfactorily, Boris?" "I think so." "That is good. An official denial from Moscow will be forthcoming, if necessary." There was a pause, and then the clear voice of the German broke the silence. "I am directed by Mr. Brown to place the summaries of the reports from the different unions before you. That of the miners is most satisfactory. We must hold back the railways. There may be trouble with the ASE." For a long time there was a silence, broken only by the rustle of papers and an occasional word of explanation from the German. Then Tommy heard the light tap of fingers drumming on the table. "And the date, my friend," said number one. "The 29th. The Russian seemed to consider, "That is rather soon." "I know, but it was settled by the principal Labour leaders, and we cannot seem to interfere too much. They must believe it to be entirely their own show." The Russian laughed softly, as though amused. Yes, he said, "that's true. They must have no inkling that we are using them for our own ends. They are honest men, and that is their value to us. It is curious, but you cannot make a revolution without honest men. The instinct of the population is infallible. He paused and then repeated, as though the phrase pleased him, every revolution has had its honest men. They are soon disposed of afterwards. There was a sinister note in his voice. The German resumed. Climbs must go. He's too far-seeing. Number 14 will see to that. There was a hoarse murmur. That's all right, Governor. And then after a moment or two, suppose I'm nabbed. You will have the best legal talent to defend you, replied the German quietly. But in any case, you will wear gloves fitted with the fingerprints of a notorious housebreaker. You have little to fear. Oh, I ain't afraid, Governor. All for the good of the cause. The streets is going to run with blood, so they say. He spoke with a grim relish. Dreams of it, sometimes I does. And diamonds and pearls rolling about in the gutter for anyone to pick up. Tommy heard a chair shifted. Then number 1 spoke. Then all is arranged. We are assured of success. I think so. But the German spoke with less than his usual confidence. Number 1's voice held suddenly a dangerous quality. What has gone wrong? Nothing but what? The Labour leaders, without them, as you say, we can do nothing. If they do not declare a general strike on the 29th. Why should they not? As you've said, they're honest. And in spite of everything we've done to discredit the government in their eyes, I'm not sure that they haven't got a sneaking faith and belief in it. But I know. They abuse it unceasingly. But on the whole, public opinion swings to the side of the government. They will not go against it. Again, the Russian's fingers drummed on the table. To the point, my friend. I was given to understand that there was a certain document in existence which assured success. That is so. If that document were placed before the leaders, the result would be immediate. They would publish it, broadcast throughout England, and declare for the revolution without a moment's hesitation. The government would be broken, finally and completely. Then what more do you want? The document itself, said the German bluntly. Ah, it is not in your possession, but you know where it is. No. Does anyone know where it is? One person, perhaps, and we are not sure of that even. Who is this person? A girl. Tommy held his breath. A girl. The Russian voice rose contemptuously. And you have not made her speak? In Russia, we have ways of making a girl talk. This case is different, said the German sullenly. How different? He paused a moment, then went on. Where is the girl now? The girl? Yes, she is. But Tommy heard no more. A crashing blow descended on his head, and all was darkness. When Tommy set forth on the trial of the 2 men, it took all Tuppence's self-command to refrain from accompanying him. However, she contained herself as best she might, consoled by the reflection that her reasoning had been justified by events. The 2 men had undoubtedly come from the second-floor flat, and that one slender thread of the name Rita had set the young adventurers once more upon the track of the abductors of Jane Finn. The question was, what to do next? Tuppence hated letting the grass grow under her feet. Tommy was amply employed and debarred from joining him in the chase. The girl felt at a loose end. She retraced her steps to the entry hall of the mansions. It was now tenanted by a small lift boy, who was polishing brass fittings and whistling the latest air with a good deal of vigour and a reasonable amount of accuracy. He glanced round at Tuppence's entry. There was a certain amount of the gaming element in the girl. At all events, she invariably got on well with small boys. A sympathetic bond seemed instantly to be formed. She reflected that her ally in the enemy's camp, so to speak, was not to be despised. "Well, William," she remarked cheerfully in the best-approved hospital early morning style, "getting a good shine up?" The boy grinned responsively. "Albert, miss," he corrected. "Albert be it," said Tuppence. She glanced mysteriously round the hall. The effect was purposely a broad one, in case Albert should miss it. She leaned towards the boy and dropped her voice. "I want a word with you, Albert." Albert ceased operations on the fittings and opened his mouth slightly. "Look, do you know what this is?" With a dramatic gesture, she flung back the left side of her coat and exposed a small enamelled badge. It was extremely unlikely that Albert would have any knowledge of it. Indeed, it would have been fatal for Tuppence's plans, since the badge in question was the device of a local training corps originated by the Archdeacon in the early days of the war. Its presence in Tuppence's coat was due to the fact that she had used it for pinning in some flowers a day or two before. But Tuppence had sharp eyes and had noted the corner of the threepenny detective novel produced from Albert's pocket. And the immediate enlargement of his eyes told her that her tactics were good and that the fish would rise to the bait. "American Detective Force," she hissed. Albert fell for it. "Lord," he murmured ecstatically. Tuppence nodded at him with the air of one who has established a thorough understanding. "Know who I'm after?" she inquired genially. Albert, still round-eyed, demanded breathlessly. "One of the flats?" Tuppence nodded and jerked her thumb up the stairs. "Number 20. Calls herself Vandermeer. Vandermeer, ha ha ha." Albert's hand stole to his pocket. "A crook?" he queried eagerly. "A crook, I should say so. Ready Rita, they call her in the States." "Ready Rita," repeated Albert deliriously. "Oh, ain't it just like the pictures?" It was. Tuppence was a great frequenter of the cinema. "Annie always said as how she was a bad lot," continued the boy. "Who's Annie?" inquired Tuppence idly. "Our parlour maid. She's leaving today. Many's the time Annie said to me, 'Mark my words, Albert, I wouldn't wonder if the police was to come after her one of these days.' Just like that. But she's a stunner to look at, ain't she?" "She's some peach," allowed Tuppence carelessly. "Finds it useful in her layout, you bet. Has she been wearing any of the emeralds, by the way?" "Emeralds? Them's the greenstone, isn't they?" Tuppence nodded. "That's what we're after. We're after her for. You know, old man, Rysdale." Albert shook his head. Peter B. Rysdale, the oil king. It seems sort of familiar to me. The sparklers belong to him, finest collection of emeralds in the world, worth $1 million. Lummy, came ecstatically from Albert. It sounds more like the pictures every minute. Tuppence smiled, gratified at the success of her efforts. We haven't exactly proved it yet, but we're after her, and she produced a long, drawn-out wink. I guess she won't get away with the goods this time. Albert uttered another ejaculation indicative of delight. Mind you, Sonny, not a word of this, said Tuppence suddenly. I guess I oughtn't to have put you wise, but in the States we know a real smart lad when we see one. I'll not breathe a word, protested Albert eagerly. Ain't there anything I could do, a bit of shadowing maybe, or such like? Tuppence affected to consider, then shook her head. Not at the moment, but I'll bear you in mind, son. What's this about the girl you say's leaving? Annie, regular turn up, they said. As Annie said, servants is someone nowadays, and to be treated accordingly, and what with her passing the word round, she won't find it so easy to get another. Won't she? Said Tuppence thoughtfully. I wonder. An idea was dawning in her brain. She thought a minute or two, then tapped Albert on the shoulder. See here, son. My brain's got busy. How would it be if you mentioned that you'd got a young cousin or a friend of yours had that might suit the place? You get me? I'm there, said Albert instantly. You leave it to me, miss, and I'll fix the whole thing up in 2 ticks. Some lad, commented Tuppence with a nod of approval. You might say that the young woman could come in right away, but let me know, and if it's okay, I'll be round tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Where am I to let you know to? Ritz, replied Tuppence laconically. Name of Cowley. Albert eyed her enviously. It must be a good job, this tech business. It sure is, drawled Tuppence, especially when old man Rysdale backs the bill. But don't fret, son. If this goes well, you shall come in on the ground floor. With which promise she took leave of her new ally, and walked briskly away from South Audley Mansions, well pleased with her morning's work. Okay. Join me for the next video. Join me for the next episode of Secret Adversary and find out what Tuppence is up to. Join me for the next video. Okay, I'll see you then. All right, bye.